with Artist Boat, and today we are in the saltwater wetlands around Galveston Bay, and we're going to talk about why this environment is so critical and is a great place to visit, and talk about some of the really important functions that wetlands have. So the grass that you're seeing around me is called Spartina alterniflora. That's the scientific name, and the common name is smooth cordgrass. So what's really interesting about these grasses is actually the part that we can't see. For every 1 foot of grass that you see above ground, there are 3 feet of roots underneath the ground. So I'm seeing about 3 feet of grass above ground. So that means there's about 9 feet of roots underneath the soil right now. And these roots are going to grow together like a really big net underneath the ground, and it helps to hold on to the sediment in this area. So when we have large storms that blow through, our wetlands here and our grasses are going to help to hold on to our ground, our soil, and keep it from being washed away or eroded away. So places on the coast like this, our wetlands are helping to protect our coast from erosion. So the next interesting part of the wetlands here is actually the soil. So I went ahead and took a clump out so I could show you. So this soil loves water, and it's actually really good at soaking it up, much like a sponge would soak up water. So you can kind of imagine now that our wetlands had big sponges underneath the ground. So when we have rainstorms come through, it's actually going to help soak up a lot of that water, and it will release it slowly over time. So our wetlands are helping to prevent our local areas from flooding. So Houston is actually built partially over wetland and coastal prairie soil, and both of these ecosystems are going to help soak up water when there are rainstorms. And of course in Houston, a lot of times when it rains, it floods very easily. And that's because we have lots of concrete foundations that do not allow the water to pass through back into the soil. So that's our parking lots, our roads, and all the concrete foundations that we lay down for Houston. So there's not anywhere for the water to flow when we have a storm. It's really important to have wetlands on the coastline that are going to help soak in a lot of that water. For every 1 mile of wetland coastline, that's going to help take away about 3 feet of storm surge in the local area. Wetlands are also a great nursery habitat. So when I say the word nursery, you probably think of babies, right? In science, we call them juveniles. And it's a great place for species like fish and crustaceans and birds as well to start their life here in the estuary or in the wetland. And the reasons for that is the water here is actually very shallow. So large predators have a hard time getting back in here to get to the juveniles. The water is also, as you can see, very calm. So they don't have to worry about really big waves or strong currents that are going to pull them away from where they feel safe. And of course, the cordgrass here can act as camouflage. So coastal bird species will often have their nest within the grass and hide them away from potential predators. So it's a really great place for species to grow up. About 90% of commercially significant species of fish that we eat, whether it's snapper or grouper or trout or flounder, 90% of those spend the first part of their life in the wetland, and then as they get older, they might go out to the open ocean. Another really awesome thing that these wetlands do is act as a filter. So when there are pollutants in the water, for example fertilizer, which has that extra nutrients, the wetlands can actually take in that fertilizer or that nutrients and use it for their benefit. And that means that there is less pollution in the water that can cause a lot of harmful effects to the marine life. Not only do wetlands filter pollution out of the water, but it can also help to trap sediment that's suspended in the water. So that's going to help with the clarity of the water and make the water a little bit more clear. Probably the most important functions of wetlands is that they help combat climate change. So as humans are burning fossil fuels and putting excess carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, some of that carbon dioxide actually sinks into the wetlands, and that's why wetlands are known as a carbon sink. So the way that that happens is through the plants photosynthesizing. With photosynthesis, plants need to take in carbon dioxide to make their own food. So when the wetlands are doing that, they're actually storing a lot of the carbon component of that carbon dioxide. And wetlands can store about 10 times more carbon in their soils than a terrestrial forest can. So there's lots of carbon from thousands of years old hold in the soil in the wetland here. It can also take it in a rate that's about 6 times higher than a terrestrial forest. So wetlands are just doing a tremendous job at helping to take that excess CO2 out of the atmosphere and storing the carbon in the soil, so there's less of that carbon dioxide to act like a heat trapping blanket causing climate change. We hope that you learned a lot today about how important coastal wetland areas are, and that one day we can experience this environment with you in person. For now, share with your friends and family your newfound knowledge of this critical ecosystem that is practically in your backyard. Hi everybody, this is Karissa with Artispo, and today I'm going to show you how we make a plein air watercolor painting while on Artispo's Eco Art Kayak Adventures. Plein air painting is just painting what you see while you're out in the environment, and we're going to use watercolors to do so today. I would love for everyone to join along, even if you don't have watercolors at home. If you want to grab some markers, some colored pencils, or anything that you have to make a beautiful drawing today, I encourage you to do that with me. Before I can begin painting, I have to make sure that I have all the necessary materials to use. Today I have my watercolor paper taped to a board so that it doesn't go anywhere, and after I'm finished I'm going to have a nice border around my painting. I also have my palette of watercolors, which has all the colors that I need, and also a pencil and a paintbrush inside. So if you'd like to draw and paint along with me, go ahead and grab some supplies. So before I can even put paint on my paper, what I want to do is a really quick, simple contour line drawing. And basically what this is all the simple shapes that I see out in my environment. The first thing that I need to do is find out what is going to fit on this piece of paper. And I'm going to use my hands to help me. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to make 2 L's, and I'm going to put one over the top of the other. And this is what I call my viewfinder. So when I look through it, I can kind of plan out what is going to fit on my piece of paper. So after you figure that out, then you can begin drawing. So I'm going to do my contour line drawing, but the most important line on my paper is going to be my horizon. My horizon line is going horizontal across my paper, and it's going to divide where my sky and where my grass and water is. So for my horizon line, I'm just going to go ahead and put that in there. And you might not be able to see it, it might be a really faint line, but that's okay, because any lines that we make, we want to make sure that our paint is going to cover them up. So I put my horizon line a little bit above or a little bit below halfway on my paper, and that just helps create some visual interest. It really depends on what you want more of. Today I think I want to focus more on my grass and water. After you do your horizon line, then you're going to do a simple shape to kind of plan out your grasses. So I'm going to go ahead and sketch that in really quickly. And notice how I'm just drawing simple shapes. I'm not drawing with a lot of detail. All the detail that I want to create, I'm going to use my paint to do so. So today we're going to talk about 3 different techniques that you can use to make your watercolor painting. And notice how I'm just dipping my paintbrush right over the side of my boat, and I can use the water in my environment today. The first technique that we can use is called a wash. A wash is really good for painting large areas like your sky, where you want to cover a really large area with just a little bit of paint. So what I'm going to do is get my brush wet, and I'm going to paint a layer of water on my paper. So you might be able to see that my paper is kind of shiny now, where my sky is. And then what I'll do is get a little bit of paint on my brush and cover my sky. Now it's going to spread out really easily. My water is going to help that paint to spread. And now in just a few seconds I have covered my sky with color. What if you decide that you wanted a cloud in your sky? What you would do is actually use your paintbrush like an eraser. I wash the paint off of my brush, and I use my fingers to kind of get all the extra water off of it, and then I could swipe it over my wet paint to kind of pick up some of that color, and that's how you can make some more natural looking clouds in your sky. So that is the first technique, a wash. The next technique that I want to show you is a wet brush on dry paper, and this is going to help you pack a little bit more color into your painting. What you want to do is take your brush, get it wet, and then pick up the color that you want to use. And now you're going to apply that paint to your paper. So with this technique, you can see that the color saturates the paper a lot more, but it doesn't spread as easily because we didn't put that layer of water down first. So I have a lot more control where my colors go, and it's going to look a little bit more vibrant. So that's the second technique, wet brush on dry paper. So the last technique that I want to show you is a dry brush on dry paper. And you're going to use this technique to put details on your painting. And you might use this technique to do grass blades, or maybe a bird flying through your sky, or maybe something that's really far in the distance. So what you actually have to do first is get the paint color wet that you want to use. You have to activate that color. So I haven't used my dark green color yet, so I'll activate it with my water first. And then, in order to get my brush to be dry on my dry paper, what I'm going to do is wash it off and then use these bristles at the end to pull all the extra water off of my brush. Now, I can use my fingers to point it like a pencil, have that very sharp point, put it in the paint, and then apply it to my paper that's already dry. So I can do little blades of grass here, and with grass you always want to start from the bottom and work your way up, and that'll help to give a nice point at the end of the grass blade. The reason why you want to do details last is because you first have to wait for those first layers to dry. And I want to use that wash and that wet brush on dry paper first, and then put the details on last. If I was to put my grass blades on before I was to do the bottom layer, a lot of the white spaces of the paper would show through. So watercoloring is all about layers, so you're going to put those first layers down and then work on your details last. And like I said, you can also do something like a bird flying through your sky. So I am drying off my brush, and I've activated my paint. Now I can go in and put some birds. So this is just a really good technique for doing anything that's really small and you have a lot more control over where your paint is going. You just have to be careful to make sure that you're only using the very tip of your brush so that you can do small details. So the colors that I have in my palette, they're pretty great, but they don't always match the colors that I see out here in the environment. So what I like to do is mix colors together to create new ones. So today I'm going to make a dark brown color. I have this kind of rust color, reddish brown in there, and I also have black. So I like to mix those two together to make a more traditional dark brown. And I actually do it in the lid. A lot of times people might accidentally mix the colors in the cells, and that's just going to muddy up the color for the next person, so we don't want to do that. What I'm going to do is first get my brush wet and pick up the first color that I want to use, so that's that rust color. And then after I have a good amount on my brush, I'm just going to swipe it inside my lid. Then to keep the colors from mixing in the cells, I'm going to wash my brush off in between, and then I'm going to pick up my second color and add it in on top. And sometimes you don't always get it right. Like I can see that mine is pretty dark, so I might want to add some more brown to my color. And once you think that you have it at a good shade that you want, then you can apply it to your paper. So that's how you mix. So after I finish my painting, and then I can begin to take my tape off, and that's going to leave a nice beautiful white border around the edge, and it'll look like a frame. So when I take the tape off, I just am careful to pull one piece at a time, and I pull out away from the paper, and that's going to help keep from ripping into my painting. Today to make a plein air watercolor painting. We hope that you use these techniques in the future to make a beautiful plein air painting, and you can use them not only in the wetlands but anywhere that you go.